All right, well then maybe we will kick off. Hello everyone, thanks ever so much for taking the time to join us today for our webinar, Work in Motion, How Businesses Can Thrive in a Changing Job Market. My name is Kate and I'm the Global Head of Talent here at Employment Hero, and I'm joined today by our two guest panelists, Kate Shuker and Chloe Stambridge. Welcome aboard, guys. I think it would be wonderful if you both briefly introduced yourselves to our audience. So Kate, why don't you start us off?
Hi, I'm Kate Shuker, HR Manager at Elliott Sinclair. We're a professional consultancy with 6 offices across the South Island. I've been in HR for over 10 years now, and my focus is on building a culture that genuinely works in practice, one that makes sense for the people and the business in it.
Fantastic. Thanks so much and really appreciate having you here. And Chloe, can you intro yourself and tell our audience a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm the talent lead here at Airtree. We are an Australian-based venture capital firm with a portfolio of about 120 companies. If you're not familiar with the VC world, we raise capital and we invest that capital into tech startups across Australia and New Zealand. Amongst those 120 companies, we've got Canva, Airwallex, Safety Culture, Employment Hero. And as the talent lead, I predominantly work with our early stage companies. So anywhere from 2 to 50 people size companies, and help them to make hires, put their talent foundations in place and help them scale.
I'm not going to ask you on camera who your favorite portfolio company is, but I mean, obviously we all know the answer. So before we kick off, a little bit of housekeeping for those that are in attendance today. Please type your questions in the box down at the bottom of your Zoom screens, and we will endeavour to get to as many as we can during the presentation. And please note, for any that we don't have the opportunity to get to, we will try and answer them all after the webinar in the follow-up email. I'd also like to note that today's session is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be made available after the webinar has concluded. So with all of that out the way, let's get into the discussion. The job market in Australia and New Zealand is undergoing some pretty sizable shifts at the moment. Our report found that around 34% of Australians now hold multiple jobs. Casual and part-time roles are on the rise, and economic pressures are really affecting wages and worker confidence. So many employees are now prioritising stability, which is a phenomenon that we've called job hugging. 57% of all respondents in the report said that job stability matters more than career progression, and that rises even higher to 68% among young workers. So we certainly feel that understanding these trends is pretty critical for employers that want to thrive. So perhaps we'll kick off with you, Kate. How are you seeing these trends play out in New Zealand, and what are employers noticing in terms of workforce behaviour?
I would say in New Zealand, we're seeing very similar patterns to Australia, particularly around the rise of polyemployment and casual roles, but the tone does feel a bit more cautious. The report did show that unemployment in New Zealand is at its highest in about 9 years, with around 5.2%. And while growth's coming back, particularly down south, people are definitely prioritising stability over ambition. The focus on stability, or what the report calls job hugging, is definitely showing up for us too. We found that around 62% of Kiwi workers are now saying that job security matters more than career progression, and we can really feel that playing out. And at Elliott Sinclair, we've really seen that too. We've got staff that have been with us from 5 years to 45 years, and alongside young team members who still really want to grow, but value transparency and security. And this year, we've made a real conscious effort to keep people in the loop. We've been doing regular board updates, open conversations around the challenges this year, and that honesty has actually strengthened trust. We're in it together approach, which I think sums up how many Kiwi employers are navigating things right now.
Yeah, 45 years. Wow. I feel like that's becoming increasingly rare. And typically now when you look at someone's resume, often, they would change roles much more frequently. So interesting. Do you think that that trend is perhaps making a resurgence, and that people will aim to be more loyal to their employers?
I do think so. I think with that stability focus, if they feel that the workload's there and they've got trust in their employees, they're more likely to stick around, where in the past I feel like they would more job hop to climb that ladder.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And Chloe, perhaps you can speak a bit more to Australia. So over here, how are startups and SMEs seeing polyemployment and casualisation impact engagement and things like employee retention?
Yeah, so interesting. Naturally, a lot of employees can't be in their jobs 45 years because these companies are only popping up in the last few years. But we're really seeing this trend play out quite strongly across the portfolio. I've seen a real shift in the last few years where companies mostly have a permanent workforce to one that's really more mixed and flexible. I think some of this has been driven by the mass redundancies that we saw in the tech scene over the last few years, and there's a little bit of anxiety. But there's been a real increase in fractional, this is kind of the term that we're using at the moment, or part-time or contracting work. And I think there's two buckets. There's those that are intentionally following that kind of work style because they want to work remotely. My sister lives in London and she's been in Morocco for the last 5 weeks surfing because she works as a freelancer. Those folks get exposure to different industries, different projects. They get flexibility and autonomy that they might not get in a permanent role. And I think this works well in our industries for product designers, product marketers, even talent partners or finance teams. But then you've got the other bucket that are not doing it out of choice, but they're doing it because maybe they can't afford to live in a city. Maybe they have to work remotely. And the only way that they can do that is by working in a contract role because companies want to start building cultures back in the office, etc. Now, from a company perspective and from our portfolio, they get to move faster because they've got someone who's coming in, hitting the ground running, and they've got deep expertise in their craft. There's a great level of transparency across the business. The permanent people understand that there's casual folks, amongst the workforce. They've come in for a specific project, but once that project winds down, there isn't that big fear of redundancies anymore. As I mentioned, I work a lot with our early stage companies, and it's common for them to hire these experts early on when they want to test something. They're very cash sensitive. Hiring someone in a permanent capacity means that a lot of what we've invested in them is going to be blown in a first year. So for them, they want to test out how they go to market, bringing an account executive in to, test if people are actually going to buy the product. And by doing that on a part-time basis or fractional or contract, it allows them to have that flexibility without that pressure of that permanent person potentially not working out. And I think on the exec side of things as well, we've seen this real trend. Some of our small companies, instead of hiring permanent execs, COOs, chief people officers, CFOs, for example, instead they'll bring people in on a fractional basis. And those folks have been in, a great career in a larger company. And then for them, they get to go into these smaller companies and do 2 days here, 3 days there. So from their perspective, they get to work across multiple different challenges without getting bored, rather than moving to a smaller company where they're a little bit more confined. So we're definitely seeing it. I don't know if I can comment on people having multiple jobs because it's not something that I'm privy to, but we're definitely seeing this workforce shift for that flexibility.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost like with the trends are at the opposite end of the spectrum. So some people are really leaning into max flexibility, multiple roles, fractional work. And then you've got some people that are just absolutely craving that long year, potentially as long as 45-year career stability and really job hugging, as we're calling it, and sticking with that one organization. So it is interesting. Anecdotally, actually, I have a few sort of mutual friends that have what I would call like full-time, corporate jobs, Monday to Friday. And a few of them have picked up weekend work to help out with, it might be saving for a holiday or something along those lines, which does feel quite new. That's not something that I recall happening sort of earlier in my career. So it is interesting. And I think in those cases, obviously, they've been honest with their employers and it doesn't impact their substantive role. But something that I think some employers will be increasingly concerned about is a concept of moonlighting. So if you're like a remote business or a hybrid business, you employ someone full time, and then secretly they have a full second substantive role, which is in most cases a breach of their employment contract, but you may not find out straight away. So perhaps a follow-up question for both of you: what can employers do to kind of keep tabs on that and make sure that if people do have multiple jobs, they're comfortable with it and it's understood and agreed by both parties, and that there's not any kind of behind the back activity happening with the second job that they're not aware of?
So we have a policy in place for any secondary employment. The staff need to let us know. And it's not so much around, moonlighting or potentially working in a competitive space, but to look out for burnout. Because like you said, we're seeing, we might call it side hustles here in New Zealand, but we are seeing a rise of that. The cost of living is high and people have had to diversify. So we're more worried about people burning themselves out and doing too much and really keeping a focus on that.
Yeah, that's such an interesting take on that one. Similar, I think, building that trust and transparency. And of course, if it's a conflict of interest, that would need to be addressed. But if it's not, taking the time to understand that employee, if they need a larger salary, working out ways that they can, progress in their career and what that would look like and how they can get there with their existing employer.
Fab. All right, well, thank you both for sharing. Now that we've talked a little bit about the changing landscape and what seems to be trending at the moment, let's perhaps switch gears a bit and look at strategies for actually supporting your teams. So from what we saw, education, training, career development, and interestingly, AI-enabled learning are increasingly important elements of your employee value proposition. Our report shows that training, and in particular, like that kind of AI first training, is providing really decisive retention. So 2 in 3 employees who are satisfied with their upskilling report feeling settled in their roles, compared to less than 1 in 10 of those without training opportunities. So Kate, perhaps we'll start with you. Talk to us about how Elliott Sinclair is using training, career development, and that AI-enabled learning piece to help retain talent.
Sure. So at Elliott Sinclair, I would say over half of our team would take part in formal professional development. And then we also have a mix of internal training that's project led by our managers. And for example, our survey team, they work with our graduates from the start on a program to get them licensed. We've also leaned into AI really deliberately. We've set up an internal AI council and we're encouraging innovation through new ideas and knowledge sharing. And I've actually just introduced awards for the best AI use cases. It's the company's way of getting the benefits with new tech without the risk of shadow AI. And what we're seeing from all of this isn't necessarily about turnover, it's about confidence and clarity. People feel they're growing, they're trusted to experiment, and that's been huge for engagement.
Fantastic, thank you. And Chloe, how do you feel Australian startups are embedding learning and development and progression into their EVP to help attract top talent?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love that you have AI awards. That's amazing. But L&D looks very different in our early stage companies versus our growth stage. And to clarify, an early stage company is maybe 2 to 40, 50 people. Growth stage company is 500, 1,000 employees plus. Our larger companies typically have a team or a team member dedicated to L&D, and it's a formalized and fair approach. They could also put on training. For example, mental health training is a big one that employees have been asking for, and being able to support them with those formalized approaches. In our smaller companies, they don't have that luxury of employing someone in this role. They can't afford an allowance. So instead, they look at learning in a different way. Instead of it being a benefit that's in a job description, it's a culture. And by that, I mean they're growing so rapidly, which allows their team members to experience and contribute to a range of different types of problems. Internal mobility, for example, is a lot easier. Folks are able to identify, oh, I want to join that team. I wonder what they're doing. Or, there's less formalized approaches, so they're able to grow in their career a lot quicker, maybe than you might in a larger corporate organization. But very similar to Kate, a lot of teams are creating these peer learning groups. So with AI, for example, engineers are teaching the rest of the team and giving them that time to get them up to speed. And at Airtree, actually, I'll go back a step. I came back from parental leave at the start of this year, and I don't know what happened with AI while I was on leave, but I had huge imposter syndrome. I came back to a completely changing workforce and then also joined Airtree, which is right in the thick of it. A lot of our new investments are in AI companies. So I was like, I need to get ramped up and get up to speed ASAP. But fortunately, we had a small group at Airtree who were way ahead of the curve and geeking out on all these AI tools. And they showcased them at a company team time, so one of our weekly team events. They said, these are the tools that we're using, ask questions, let's all learn together. Off the back of that, they then ran an AI hackathon, which only was like a couple of hours. We got cool t-shirts made. So we could all have dedicated time to play with those tools. And there's no software engineers, like we're not technical people here at Airtree. And then off the back of that, to further reinforce it, we started an AI Slack channel. So everyone in the company, which is we're only a 45-person company, was able to share new tools that everyone's using and ask questions. So it's a really safe space, which I think is so important, especially again, me, imposter syndrome, coming back to Airtree, didn't want to sound silly. And if anyone's interested, Prompt Cowboy is our current favorite. If anyone else is using it, if you know, you know. You basically type a really simple prompt into it. It asks you, I think, 3 clarifying questions, and then it gives you this really smart, elaborate prompt that you put into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you're using, and it gives you a much better result. So I think doing these things, encouraging these things from the top down means that people are growing quicker in their careers and they don't need the kind of formalized budgets in a much smaller company. So there's definitely ways to be able to do that.
Fab. Yeah, we're similar. We had awards. We had an external hackathon actually, and hired someone off the back of it that submitted a really fantastic idea. We've really been embedding it deeply. Something that we also did was we had our learning specialist who works in the launch team, we call it, design some AI training and put it out to all of our employees via the Employment Hero and Go On integration. And that was really handy. The fact that we had someone design it in-house and be quite quick and scrappy about it was really handy because, as you've mentioned, Chloe, it's moving so fast that that information very quickly becomes outdated. So we've been sort of iterating on it every couple of months and making sure that we're keeping team knowledge up to date and also including that in new hire onboarding. So that's been really, really handy. I'm interested to know though, and it might vary a little bit by market, in both of your experiences, what captures candidate interest the most when you're talking about learning and career development? Is it learning on the job? Is it really formalized learning? Is it, a budget to go and do a master's? Is it a clear career progression pathway? What do you think is sort of most popular?
It's quite a mixed bag for me. I feel like our graduates, they want that mentorship in-house. They want to learn from the experts in their field. And then some of the more established people in their careers, they're wanting to go to those conferences. We've got someone doing their master's right now because he wants a pathway to directorship. So it really does depend on the individual, which is why we upskill our managers to identify what they're looking for.
Again, very mixed and depends on the individual, but I think a lot of people who join a startup, they're not doing it for flexibility and the nice hours, they're doing it because they want to learn rapidly and they want to be around really inspiring people as well. So I think for them, it's being around high performers, being around great people, and almost like speeding up their career in that sense because they have to do so much and they're given so much autonomy and trust early days.
Fab. All right. Well, for our listeners then, perhaps good tip. try and incorporate speaking to on-the-job learning, particularly for graduate positions, and speak to the mentorship that they're going to have internally, and maybe have a go at some hackathons or some competitions around use of AI. Which leads quite nicely onto our next topic, which was technology. So we know from the report that technology can be quite a game changer for A, employee engagement, and B, also their ability to be flexible, because it obviously allows your teams to collaborate and stay connected, even if they're working from home or even if they're across multiple locations. I know that's certainly our experience at EH. For anyone that's less familiar with us, and this might be your first webinar, we've got 1,700 people now and are based across about 19 different countries. So have really had to lean into technology to make sure that we're able to collaborate. And our annual jobs report was interesting. It shows that 71% of Australians feel confident adapting to new technologies. And perhaps unsurprisingly, confidence was especially high among younger workers and also those in larger businesses, which is interesting. The large business part stood out to me because obviously we work with a lot of SMEs. So keen to ask you both about that. Perhaps kicking off with Kate, what technology and platforms are you using over in New Zealand for your organisation to support things like workforce engagement and to support things like flexible work arrangements?
Sure. So we use quite a few platforms day to day. Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and Employment Hero would be the main ones. They've really become the backbone of how we stay connected across the 6 offices. We find Employment Hero is great for recognition, birthdays, work anniversaries, especially those 45-year ones, shout outs. It's the small things that, keeps things visible when we're spread out. Most of our work would be office-based as well, but flexibility is a big part of our culture. We've got a 9-day fortnight, which people can opt into. We've got flexible start and finish times and the freedom to work from home when it makes sense. But we are trying to bring people back into the office just for that culture. For example, one of our engineers has been working remotely all year while helping on her partner's family farm. And we catch up with her over Teams, and she joins one of our offices around the South Island once a month. And that sort of arrangement just works for us because the systems are there and the trust is there. So for us, it's not really about logging on from anywhere. It's about keeping conversations, updates, and recognition flowing. So no matter where people are, they still feel part of the same team.
Fantastic. And how did you go about any sort of newer platforms or tools that have helped with that? How did you go about rolling that out and making sure that it was easy for all people to get to grips with it? Because we touched on the fact that maybe a younger generation in particular report higher levels of confidence with new technology, but maybe an older generation might not. So any tips that you could share around rolling out a new piece of tech?
I did quite a few live demos. I would go on Teams calls. I set up sort of like 3 or 4 Teams calls throughout the day, depending on the topic. And then I would record those and put them on SharePoint as well, because like you say, some people are a bit more intuitive and some people are like, change, So we found the demos really good. And then on our SharePoint page, I also did a cheat sheet. So people could do a search really quickly to navigate how they needed to submit a leave request or shout out to one of their teams.
Fab. Awesome. Thank you. And Chloe, I think that a lot of people will be interested to hear this because startups are often perceived to be very forward thinking when it comes to technology adoption. So talk to us about what you're seeing in the startup space. In particular, what tools are they using to enhance things like engagement, productivity, flexibility? What are you seeing?
Yeah, as you said, startups have always been early adopters of technology. I think what has changed over the last year is intentionality. So rather than chasing every new tool, the best teams are choosing tech that actually deepens engagement and flexibility. And then, as Kate mentioned, taking the time to train the teams how to use it and adopt it. I remember in one of my first recruitment companies that I worked for, we had this horrific system that was built internally for us. It was so clunky, it wasn't intuitive. Like those times have just changed so much, but we almost have the complete opposite problem where there's so many tools. So spending the time to actually work out which is the best one for you, for your business, and then expanding that across the team. But similarly, seeing so many of the startups in the portfolio adopt async tools like Bloom, which is small 5-minute videos to help people learn, or Notion documents understanding that everyone learns and absorbs information in different ways. So ensuring that that's all documented. And these tools then also help these distributed teams stay connected without burning out on meetings. Like Kate, I'm sure from your perspective, I think you said 1,700 employees, 19 countries. Like that's crazy. How does everyone keep across everything? So it's really important. And again, AI has just been a game changer for engagement. Teams are using it to automate a lot of their admin tasks. There's AI note takers, which I'm sure a few people are using for this call, for example. And by removing some of those admin tasks through those tools, they can make more space for meaningful and creative work. So that then has a direct impact on their job satisfaction and productivity because they're doing more of the work that they love. I think another big piece to note is transparency. So startups are using tools, again, like Notion or Employment Hero, to make progress visible across the entire company. And that visibility then keeps people motivated, especially if it's a hybrid or remote setup. I've often spoke to candidates who want to get back into the office. Maybe they're living in Melbourne and the office is in Sydney because so many conversations happen in the office. But if we have tools that enable, jump on a quick Slack huddles link, for example, so they feel like they're part of that conversation a little bit easier. But it's funny, Kate, when I joined Airtree, I was so pleased to know that they had Zoom, MacBooks, and G Suite. And Kate, you said you're the complete opposite with all the Microsoft tools. But it's so funny how we quickly become accustomed to this. And for me, like that's a big part of my experience as an employee. If I had to learn all these other different tools, it might have been a little bit different.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. For anyone that's curious, if you haven't had this before, we use Employment Hero at EH, but in terms of kind of bringing everyone together, we use a lot of documentation. We're using Confluence primarily, but I know some other organizations use Notion, and we also use Slack. Also use Loom so that we can send videos that can be consumed asynchronously in that person's time zone rather than having to have a call with them at 9 p.m. or whatever it might be in their time zone. And if I reflect on kind of the trends that we're seeing around more fractional work, more poly-employment, people kind of coming on board for a short period of time and then potentially moving on to another assignment, that documentation piece, we've always prioritized it primarily because it's really helpful for being remote, but actually that would be a really good tip as well for any businesses out there that are wanting to lean into this use of kind of fractional workers or more casual workforce. Having really, really strong documentation helps you to bring people up to speed super quickly and means that even if you've got people kind of rolling on or off of projects, you've got a really clear view of where things are at when the next person comes on board to help pick things up and move them along. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you both for sharing. I thought that we need to allow some time for Q&A. So if you're listening in and you've got questions, please feel free to start popping them in the box. But I would love to finish up the discussion with some kind of practical, actionable strategies that employers can implement now, like could go away and do in the next few weeks to help with talent attraction and retention. And also, I suppose, building those kind of resilient teams that are ready for the future, because I think it's clear from all the data that we've talked through that it is quite a high change environment at the moment with things like job flexibility, job stability, increased use of AI. It is really high change. So maybe starting off with you, Kate, in your view, what are the most effective actions that you think employers, and if you fancy maybe particularly New Zealand employers, can take over the next few months that are really going to strengthen their teams?
Sure. So I've already touched on the AI awards, but we've also introduced another internal award called the Extra Mile, which is recognition for business development. And that's gone down really well. And I guess the bottom line is people want to know that the efforts they're making for the companies that they work for is being seen. The 9-day fortnight is a real favourite in our team, but the biggest shift for us has been around transparency. I did an engagement survey earlier in the year and it showed that staff wanted more visibility from the board. So this year we've really prioritised that. We've had regular updates and open conversations about the business, and the feedback has been incredibly positive. It's helped everyone stay connected and feel informed. And we have stayed steady through the year. We're growing again. And I tell you, Employment Hero Smart Match is my best friend. One of my roles, I had over 800 applicants for a graduate role, which shows how active the market is in New Zealand at that early career level. But what we're finding the challenge is for senior hires. Those senior hires are prioritising job security over career progression. And when we're approaching senior candidates, it's not really about the salary anymore. It's more about the forward workload and business stability. And to me, building resilience is a mix of all of it. Transparency, well-being, financial steadiness, cross-skilling. There's no single fix, but consistency builds trust, and trust is what keeps your people.
And any tips around how you've demonstrated the job stability at Elliott Sinclair? Have you had case studies or testimonials from the 45-year employees that you've kind of promoted and put out there to try and elicit more of an engagement or more of a response from those senior level candidates?
Absolutely. We've actually undertaken video interviews this year with those senior staff because, you know, they might choose to retire soon, and we really want to capture that on video. And we use those videos in our job advertisements, plus on our social media pages and our website. So one thing that when I interview staff is they already recognise the culture and the long-standing staff within the team. So it shows me that that's working.
Fabulous, thank you. And Chloe, what strategies are you seeing work best for Australian startups when it comes to attraction, retention, and again, kind of building those resilient teams while they're trying to scale at the same time?
Across our portfolio, the startups that are scaling well all have a few things in common. The first is real clarity, having a story that connects every employee to purpose. When people understand why the company exists and where it's headed, it becomes so much easier to attract and retain the right talent. And this is usually based on solving a problem for the customer, not just all about increasing revenue. The second, again, is through transparency and trust. So those founders who share the highs, share the lows, creates that psychological safety and makes the team feel safe and allows them to take risks or to be able to fail in a safe space too. And I think that really helps build resilience within the team. Using learning as a currency. So when those budgets are tight, where they don't have someone in the L&D team, for example, promoting those kind of activities, growth opportunities are then the new pay rise. So offering mentorship, stretch roles, even cross-functional exposure can do a lot more for retention than any title change. And off the back of that, making sure your leadership team really care about their people. So they're having those conversations. They're not missing their one-on-ones. They actually care about the future of that employee and where they're going and helping them find those opportunities.
Mentorship, I think, is something that's discussed frequently, but some organizations are a bit nervous to roll it out because they're not quite sure how to do it, what the expectations are of the mentor, how to set people up. So it would be good to know if you've seen that work well in any organizations, how have they built that and how have they delivered it in a way that kind of works for everyone?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of a company that has rolled that out internally, and maybe Kate S, you've got an example of this. But what we offer here through our portfolio, because we're across so many different leaders, execs, incredible people, we will offer to connect people with mentors. So for example, a company is hiring their first head of product. They've no idea how to hire that person or what good looks like. We will connect them with someone who will advise them. And we've got an operating advisor board or list of people who are well referenced in our network that we'll connect them with. So we'll say, you have to speak to Kate Jolly about this because, she's been in this role for this amount of time. She's built a talent function this size, and connect those two people and provide mentorship in that way. But I agree, it is really hard to actually put a formalized program in place because what's expected of the mentor, what's expected of the mentee. And especially a lot of these companies don't even have a HR team to coordinate that as well.
Yeah, anything that you would add to that, Kate? Because I think it's something that there's a strong appetite for, but I always hear a lot of nervousness around maybe quite how to roll it out.
It's quite critical for us for some of our roles. For our graduate engineers and surveyors, their goal is to get chartered or licensed. So that can be a deal breaker on if they're going to stay with the company or not. So what we've done is we've got a program documented on what's expected of the mentor and the mentee. We buddy them up with someone, and we allow the managers to have that time to prioritize that mentoring. So that's what I would say, is allow your managers the time, support them with the documentation. And it's really important to listen to those employees when it's vital for their career, because for us, if they don't have a path to get that chartership or that licensing, then they will move to another company. And then we've done all the groundwork and kind of lost them just before they've got that license. So that's what I would say.
Fab. Yeah, I think what's worked well for us is we push people to be quite not entirely self-sufficient, but definitely to have some self-sufficiency around career development and the direction they want to take things in. And also to be quite honest with themselves around where their strengths and weaknesses are. And so what we would typically do is if someone's identified an area where they want to improve or need to improve, maybe to get to that next level, ask them to be quite proactive in talking to us about that. So it might be, I know that I'm good at delivering in my role, but I want to take the next step into management. Something I really struggle with is being assertive or pushing back on an idea if I don't think it's the right decision. Can you partner me up with someone that's a really strong leader in that particular area that can maybe give me some quite tailored advice around how I might build my skill set in that space? So I suppose not too dissimilar to what you've been doing at Airtree, but often would be focused more on a development area for a person as opposed to linking it purely based on career type. Fantastic. Well, thank you both for talking through all of that with me. I'm now going to start going through Q&A. We're going to be answering live, so should you have any further questions, please do add them to the box. First question that I'm going to answer here is about tips for grads, new people entering the workforce, given how fast it is changing. Any tips for those individuals, or maybe people that have kids, family, whatever, that are graduating soon? What's the best thing they can do to make the most of entering this very high change workforce?
I would say every person is different. You mentioned mums that might be graduating, so they might have flexible start and finish times. Sorry, could you repeat part of that question again?
Yeah. Just tips for grads entering the workforce. It might be for people on the call that are grads, or it might be like, they're related to someone that's going to be graduating soon and want to pass on some advice.
I guess I touch on what you said before about being proactive. And one thing we say is, you are in the driver's seat of your career. Some of the more sort of, introverted or a bit nervous grads, when on their first day, I usually have a one-on-one with them, and I say, any training that you're interested in. If you're a bit nervous about asking your manager, you can use me as a sounding board first, and then, I can feel it out and let you know if I think it's a good idea or not. But it would just be that what you said, being proactive, you're in the driver's seat, and we're here to support you.
Anything to add, Chloe? Yeah.
I think it's a really tough market for grads, and I really, really do feel for them. When there's a role open, there's a huge amount of applications. So my one piece of advice would be try to stand out. Australia in particular is such a network-driven market. So talk to as many people as you can, get referred into companies. And like, we've got LinkedIn, everything is so accessible nowadays. Find out who the hiring manager is, try contact them directly, and just send them a very direct message in terms of getting yourself out there and sharing your skills and why you want to work there.
Fantastic, thank you. And next question is, with career options changing so quickly, how do you define career paths or opportunities internally? I have some thoughts on this, but maybe Chloe will stick with you first.
This is really difficult, especially in small companies where they have no idea where the company is going to go or grow to, never mind what's going to happen with their teams. So I think it's important to have some sort of structure and build that out. It doesn't need to be a 5, 10, 45-year plan, but having something in there where there's different levels, there's competencies around that, and then supporting that person to go through that. That might change, that's fine. Have that flexibility in that conversation. But I think it's really going to support and motivate someone if they have clear guidelines around the role that they're in and the steps that they need to take to get to the next stage or phase in their career.
Anything that you would add to that, Kate?
I would just say around prioritising those one-on-ones, ensuring the managers have those performance reviews, asking those questions about career goals. And as far as vacancies, when they come up, we do try and advertise them internally first, and then we put them out to market. So we give the staff the opportunity to put their hands up for those roles if they may not have told their manager that they're interested in shifting teams or changing their career path.
Yeah, fab. Thanks so much, both. I think at EH, yeah, I mean, it's a very different business now than when I first joined 5.5 years ago. But at the time, we were a very small business, and there was absolutely no immediate progression pathway, for instance, for me when I joined. But the business has grown so much that a lot of new roles have been created. And so it would have been very difficult for someone to have had a career progression chat with me at the beginning because there wasn't an obvious next step. But that's kind of been created through the fact that we've grown so much. So I think for us, it's often about talking both to existing employees, but also external candidates that are thinking about joining us, about our growth rate, about what that's meant for different people within the business. Because often we might not be able to pinpoint the exact role that someone might move into right now. It might not exist yet, but we're growing so much and there are so many new opportunities and projects and teams spinning up that there could well be an opportunity in the future. So I think it's important to highlight that as well if you are quite a kind of fast moving, fast growing business. Someone here has asked tips on how to create a simple unified LMS, learning management system, that tracks learnings from different platforms. So from a personal standpoint, we use Employment Hero and Go One and find that really effective. Kate or Chloe, any other tips or anything else that you would add?
We experiment and trial. A lot of the companies that we invest in have LMSs. I think using one that's quite interactive and easy to use is the best one. But a lot of our companies don't have them, so I probably wouldn't be able to give a great answer on that one.
Fab. Anything that you'd add, Kate?
I'm similar. We use Employment Hero, and then, it might be Engineering NZ that the staff might register their CPD hours against, but I'm in a similar position as Chloe.
Fantastic. Next question is benefits of having a direct correlation between L&D programs taken by an employee to their retention risk or performance level. So I think this is asking, if someone is partaking in a lot of L&D programs, does that help to retain them, and does it have a positive impact on their performance level? And is the inverse also true?
I would love to have stats around this, but I think it's something that's really hard to measure. I think if they are using their budget, engaging in L&D programs, it shows high engagement. And I think high engagement equals high retention. It means that they're interested in what they're doing. And if you've got someone who is motivated and interested in what they're doing, then I think it's easier to hold on to them.
The only other thing I would add to that is we encourage knowledge sharing. So if a team member is going, off externally, we'll organise a toolbox, or it might be a lunch and learn where that knowledge can be shared. So then other team members benefit from that as well. And I think any knowledge sharing or upskilling helps with retention.
Yeah, I don't have any data on it to hand, but I would say anecdotally, in my experience, it's probably been a bit of a mixed bag. I find that people that get really involved in training that we've rolled out, things like being AI first, how to write great prompts, etc. A lot of those employees have been really highly engaged. Conversely, sometimes someone might ask for a learning budget to go and learn about something very different to what their current substantive role is. And often that's a pretty clear indicator that they might be thinking about a career change and maybe they're not loving their current role, which is a good opportunity to have an open conversation with them and just see whether or not you can support with the direction that they want to head in and what that might look like for your organization. So I've always found it to be a bit of a mixed bag, but I would certainly anticipate, based on everything we talked about today, with it being quite desirable for job seekers and employees for retention, that having some form of learning as part of your ways of working, whether it's learning on the job or something more formalized, would be really beneficial. Next question is a little bit more around people who struggle to identify a career path and maybe don't know what they want to do, particularly given how high change everything is at the moment. Any tips for those individuals that might be newer to the workforce or not feeling 100% about what they're doing at the moment? How can they identify what might be the right next step?
I think this came from a career coach, so I think speak to you and work through that. But of course, not everyone has the luxury of knowing or engaging with a career coach. I'm going to default here and say use AI, like use ChatGPT, for example, as your virtual career coach and play around with a few ideas. It's hard to get exposure to a lot of different things when you just don't know what you do in an engineering company or what you do in a startup. So try gain as much information as you can, go to meetups, speak to as many people as possible. And if you do have the luxury of trialing out different things, well, of course, doing that via internships or grad programs too. But I think if you join a company that you're really passionate about, get into that company first, whatever role that might be, and then potentially have that internal mobility when you can experiment and find out what it is that you actually love doing within that company.
Yeah, I think it's very different now to when I was first starting out, but I had no clue what I wanted to do and kind of just ended up giving something a go and fortunately enjoyed it. And I suppose I iterated somewhat on the parts that I wasn't enjoying and then kept the parts that I was enjoying. So I think often my advice would be just try something. If there's something you think is interesting, take a step in that direction. And should it not work out, that's okay. You can pivot a little bit and move in another direction. But I think the whole analysis paralysis is very real, and that's probably very heightened for job seekers and graduates at the moment. And often taking a decision, doing something, often helps you to learn and understand much faster whether or not you're going to enjoy it or it's going to be the right fit, rather than spending months and months and months trying to plan the sort of perfect outcome. So I think that would be my tip. Fab. All right, well, I think that is all of our questions for today. If you do have any further, oh no, one's just popped up. Thanks all. Research has shown that 95% of us are opportunistic job seekers unless we have a vocation. Yeah, that actually doesn't surprise me. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for everyone that contributed to the discussion today. Really, really good to have you both on board. So huge thank you, Kate and Chloe, for joining us. For all of our listeners, a survey will automatically launch after we end the webinar, and we would really appreciate it if you took a moment to please fill it in. We will also be sending out the 2025 annual job report alongside some additional resources and the webinar recording after today's session. So you'll have access to all of that. Hope you all have a really wonderful afternoon and hope to see you again next time. I know that there are a few more webinars to come over the next few months. So hope to see you all at the next one.
Thanks, Kate and Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate and Chloe.